no big deal, right? So essentially, it's like it was. We don't want to change. That is the mindset right now, and this, and that mindset is actually devastating to who we are, because it's basically saying that there is nothing to spirituality. There is nothing more than just being a machine.
We think that our natural selves don't exist, and we identify purely with an adaptive self, a sense of identity that's given by the stories, culture, society, and we tell ourselves about what we are supposed to be and what we are not supposed to be. And then that natural self that we deny, as Carl Gustav Jung put it, that natural self that is repressed and denied, it manifests itself in life, and you call it fate. So you could say that we are always projecting. There is a world out there that is objective, that doesn't depend on what we wish, what we don't wish, what our traumas are, what we repress. It doesn't depend on any of that. There is such a world out there. And the contours of that world appear on the screen of perception. But that's not the world in which we truly live, is it? The world in which we truly live is the world of what we tell ourselves about what's going on in the world. We live in our own narratives. Otherwise, if you looked out, you wouldn't see streets, cars, and people. You would see pixels, an arbitrary dance of pixels and notes. You wouldn't hear words. You wouldn't see stories unfolding. There would be no meaning. The meaning, which is the world where we think we are living, that meaning is given by us. And the more you repress and ignore about yourself, the more those projections will look autonomous and totally independent of you. And they will look overwhelming, and you will feel that you have no power against them. You will feel that you are living in a world where you're completely powerless, and you feel completely overwhelmed. But the more you know about yourself metacognitively, the more you can introspect and spot your own bullshit, all the bullshit you tell yourself. The more you see through those layers, and it's like an onion, never ends. But the more you see through that.
How can reality be made of black and white, right, wrong, true, false? Okay. You can create realities or systems for which that is true. A mathematical theory, for example, lives on the strict regimen of true or false. If something is not 100% true, it's false.
Right.
Okay, so even 99.9999% right, true, if it's not 100%, it's false. Okay, so that's that world.
Black and white.
Black and white.
Okay. Your computer bits are the same way, right? Voltages from 0.6 to 1 are on. Yeah, exactly.
The bit, there is no half bit, there is no quarter bit.
Right.
It's
rounded up to the nearest bit.
0 or 1. There is no 0.9. Okay. But even in quantum physics is mostly probabilistic. So you have only probabilities which are not 0. They are more than 0 and less than 1.
Right.
But if it was that way, you could not falsify quantum physics. To falsify quantum physics, you must predict situations in which the probability is 1 or 0 that will happen. And quantum physics does. So quantum physics can be falsified because it can predict situations in which the probability is 1 or is 0.
You can be in a mode of experiencing in which you realize that there are whole universes that do not comply with any of these three things I mentioned. They don't obey the linear laws of space and time. They don't comply with the laws of physics, and they don't obey the rules of logic either. I think it is naive to think that reality can be completely corralled and captured by the axioms of our primate logic. That's not how things work. And I think artists are the explorers that we send out across that boundary, across the dissociative boundary, to have a look at what is on the other side and bring something back to us. And of course, they can't use words to describe what they see because language already has logic and space and time built into it. Subject and object, past and future is all built into language. And it's naive to think that the only things that exist are those that can be spoken. Language didn't evolve to capture the whole of reality. It evolved for very pragmatic reasons. Where is the tiger hiding? Where is the tree with good fruit? That's what language evolved for. So there is a whole realm of existence. It's very reasonable to assume beyond
systems,
language.
like a computer. Computer is a classical system. It works with bits, 1 or 0. And consciousness must be a quantum phenomenon. Quantum phenomenon. A quantum phenomena work with qubits, a quantum bits. Quantum bits are actually, they represent an infinity of states versus bits that represents only 2 states, 1 or 0. And a qubit in this realm manifests in our realm, in our space-time, as a bit. So all you can know about that qubit, which is an infinity of states, becomes 0 or 1. So that tells you that there is a reality, the quantum reality, which is far, far vaster than the classical reality that is so reductive, because an infinity is mapped into 1 or 0.
We got used to think of images as the thing in itself. Although Kant already warned us 250 years ago, more or less, and Schopenhauer after him 200 years ago, they already warned us that the phenomena, what appears on the screen of our perception, whether it's aided by instrumentation or not, the things we call matter, extended matter in space and time, these are representations. These are how the world as it is in itself presents itself to us upon being observed. And of course, these representations are not there if you're not looking, because the world as it is in itself is not the representation. It is the thing that projects the representation. And it is the only thing that has stand-alone existence. So matter is representation, is the image, an appearance. And the more we zoom into matter, the more we realize that it's just pixels. There is nothing else that has standalone existence there. And actually, if you look close enough, even the pixels disappear, and then you start having to talk in terms of pure abstraction, like quantum fields, which are just mathematical tools. So we have no reason to think of quantum fields as existent, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And it's not only physics, it's neuroscience of consciousness. It's hitting some walls that outright contradict materialism. And people are desperate to find a way out of it, just like physicists have been desperate to find a way out of these contradictions from quantum physics. And analytic philosophy itself shows that, even if you don't look at the empirical data, even if you just reason things out with discipline, applying logic consistently, you are probably not going to choose materialism because it leads to insoluble problems like the hard problem of consciousness.
And quantum computers operate with qubits. But qubits cannot exist in our space-time. So where are the operations made? Where, a quantum computer can operate, much, much faster for certain problems than classical computers. It doesn't matter how fast you make essentially a classical computer, it cannot measure up, because in this quantum reality, you can operate in all those possible situations simultaneously because of entanglement, the property of entanglement. So because of that, you set up the problem in this space-time. and you get the answer in this space-time. But the operation cannot occur in space-time. So there's got to be something real. If you do computation out of thin air, where
where is it happening?
Where is it happening? Okay, so there is some reality there that I would say that only quantum computers are forcing us to face. It's not an answer question. Nobody knows what's going on. We're taking advantage of it, but we don't know what's going on. Okay, but the point though is that classical physics describes reality as if reality was real. In other words, there is an object that moves in space and time. It goes through a trajectory, and you can tell every point of the way where this object goes, because that's reality. So
it's a thing that's
it's
moving.
about ontology. Yeah. Classical physics describes the ontology of the world.
The being, the true thing in and of itself.
Yeah, the stuff of which the world is made that interacts in certain ways according to certain laws, which are deterministic. But quantum physics is not that way at all. Quantum physics is epistemic. It can only tell you what you can know about a system which is vaster than what you can measure. Because to describe this system, you have to describe all the possible states that this system exists in, which are in superposition in the quantum reality, and the entanglement of these states, which have no correspective in the classical world. Okay. Then you have the collapse of the wave function, which is the sort of the mantra.
Yes, yeah.
Basically, when you actually go to find out what you're going to measure, of all these many states that were in superposition, you will measure only one. But the theory doesn't tell you which one you're going to measure, so you don't know. So the description of quantum physics tells you all that you can possibly know, and all that you can possibly know is probabilistic, not deterministic, probabilistic. Because only one of those will show. If you repeat that experiment many, many times, you will verify that the probability is what the theory is telling you. But that also requires that you can repeat the experiment, which is not necessarily possible in complicated situations. Try to...
Wave function collapse seems essential because our large-scale classical world isn't made of probability clouds, it's made of objects with clearly definable properties. So when does the quantum transition to the classical actually happen? Let's look at the process in the case of the double-slit experiment. The electron wave function passes through both slits, reaches the electronic detector, and there it excites a second electron somewhere on the detector screen. That second electron begins a cascade, an electrical impulse that travels along circuits to be registered by a computer, which updates an image on a computer screen to show where the electron hit. And that information travels via photons to light-sensitive molecules in our retinas, which initiate electrical signals to our visual cortex, and more electrical signals in other parts of the brain result in a subjective sense of the original electron's chosen destination on the screen. We call this chain of information between the detector and the mind a von Neumann chain, after the great Hungarian-American physicist John von Neumann. He wrote that wave function collapse must happen somewhere between the measuring apparatus and the conscious awareness of the result of that measurement. But exactly where? Probably not as soon as our electron wave function reaches the detector. The first electron to become excited in the detector is also a quantum object. That means the travelling electron's wave function will just become mixed with the wave functions of all electrons that it could possibly excite. We should get what we call a superposition of states, a wave function in which an electron at every location on the detector screen is simultaneously excited and not excited. So perhaps the wave function transition happens somewhere in the circuitry, or in the computer, or in the retina. But all of these things are made out of atoms. The von Neumann chain, from detector to mind, is a chain of quantum objects, with no clear boundary.
is that suppose you play a game, you are controlling an avatar in a virtual reality game, and you get so engrossed in that game that you think you are the avatar, and you think the world that you are living, experiencing, is the real world. Maybe only for 10 minutes. Okay, then you're killed. So then imagine when you're killed, all the signals that came from the virtual world stop reaching you. So now you're awake. You say, "Oh no, I didn't die. I'm a body controlling an avatar. So I was not in the computer. I thought I was in the computer, but I'm not. So I'm out here." Now suppose that your body dies. It is just like the avatar dying. The body dies, and you wake up to the other reality, and you realize that many of the signals that you were attributing to the body, they were coming from there, like your thoughts or your emotions. Not the physical signals of the world, but thoughts, emotions, that stuff that you don't know where it comes from.
But that's the real.
That's the real
That's
stuff.
the real stuff.
Powerful, safe, and effective death simulation available to us. Is the best model of death we have today. And it is not meditation. It is not 30 years of prayer in a Himalayan cave. If you have 15 minutes of time, you can have it. And that is the psychedelic experience. And I don't say that because it's far out or mind-boggling. No, I say that because what it does to your brain is exactly what's going to happen in the earlier stages of the dying process. Psychedelics massively reduce brain activity. They don't light up your brain like a Christmas tree, which was what we thought until 2012. For the past 9 years, we have known, and now these experiments have been repeated countless times. So now it's secure knowledge. Psychedelics massively reduce brain activity, particularly in a brain process that we call the default mode network. It's the part of your brain that is engaged when you're not active with a task. So you're not writing, you're not doing your work, you're not gardening, you're not talking to your spouse. You're just lying down at night in bed, waiting to sleep. If they would measure your brain activity at that point, it's the default mode network that is lit up. And the default mode network is tightly linked to the Freudian and Jungian ego. It's the part of our brain activity that engages in the narrative of the personal self. I am this person, I was born that day, I have this profession, I have this many kids, I'm married to that person. All this narrative of self, it's correlated with the brain activity that we measure in the default mode network. And that's exactly what psychedelics devastate. They annihilate brain activity in the default mode network. So it's a fantastic physiological model of death. Now, subjectively, it's a very hard experience because you just ask any psychonaut with enough experience, high enough doses, having done it frequently enough, and they will tell you that the experience, and it's called ego dissolution in that community. That's what they call it, ego dissolution. When you're undergoing that for the first time, you are absolutely sure you are dying. And you will be dead, and there is no return from that, because that's how it feels when the narrative of the personal self is taken apart. You experience that as the death of the individual self, your personal self. But you are not the personal self. You are that thing that is experiencing the death of the personal self. You are the mind that wakes up from the dream when you wake up in the morning. But you're so convinced that you are the narrative of the default mode network that you think, I'm really dying here. I will be dead and I cannot survive this. Logic is out of the window. You cannot hold on to a coherent narrative about what's going on, and that creates a lot of anxiety in a lot of people. It created anxiety in me several times. But with enough experience, the fear ceases. You just close your eyes and okay, let it go. I know the process, being there. I know I'm not going to be annihilated. I would just think that I'm being annihilated. And then you relax into that stream. You don't try to hold on to logic, to narratives, to consistency. You have to let go of all that. Your experiences become spontaneous. It's like you are walking through a forest. You're not creating the trees. You're just watching them go by. And the experience of ego dissolution is watching your personal self go by and then watch what comes afterwards come by. And you're just watching and you're not trying to control it. The control is gone. You can settle into that and it can become even pleasant. I have done this for 2 or 3 years as part of my studies because I thought I can't write a book on consciousness without having done this. It would be scholarly irresponsible, especially because I live in a country where these things are legal. Mm-hmm. So I could do that with my doctor's assistance, of all things. That's why I did that. And towards the end, what I feared the most was coming back into space, time, personal self. I call it the re-entry, and that has become very difficult for me. For most people who are doing it for the first time, ego dissolution is devastating. It's devastating. It's like the worst experience you have ever had in your life. And re-entry is very reassuring. It's like you're recomposing your personal self and you go, oh yeah, I am this person. I live in this place, and it's the year 2021, and then you feel reassured. With enough experience, that becomes devastating. The re-entry, it's like you're going back to prison and there is no window on the wall. It's incredibly claustrophobic. It's the realm of suffering.
But the point is that qualia, in the model that I have developed with Professor Dariano, it will be published shortly. In that model, certain systems that are in a pure state, that's a very special kind of state in quantum physics. Again, to explain it will take a long time, but take my word for it, there are pure quantum states. We are postulating that the system that is in that state actually experiences that state. So the pure quantum state is only the informational aspect of a reality that also has a semantic aspect, which is the feeling of that state. Witness the fact that pure quantum state cannot be cloned, cannot be copied, is private, exactly like your consciousness is private. I cannot know what you're feeling. I can only know what you tell me.
Right.
But what you tell me uses classical symbols, words, sounds, vibrations. But I cannot share your experience. That your experience, and so is mine, so is everybody else, is completely private. In a classical computer, a bit can be copied. Right. A bit is public. A bit can be read without disturbance. In the quantum world, anytime you take a qubit and you read it,
it changes it.
You have a 1 or a 0 with a certain probability, right?
Right.
So you see. So now we have a how to say a way to understand that the property that we actually observe of consciousness are reflected in these properties of pure quantum states.
So
okay, and the key thing is that when you are in that state, you have a definite experience. It is not a probability. That state, as far as you are, that system, that quantum system, is in that state. It knows that it feels that way. You don't know how I feel because, first of all, that information cannot be copied. Cannot be. No one can look at that. Nobody can know. In fact, that information doesn't even exist for the person, for the self, for the entity, for the system that experiences it. It is the experience of that what we call pure state, which is the knowing.
It's
the semantics, is the information, is the ontology. So that system is in an ontic state.
Meaning primary being, it is truth.
It is what it is experiencing that state.
Right.
Looking from the outside, I can only give a probability to that state because the system could have been in many other states. And so I could only know the probability for each of the possible states that this system is in the quantum state. That's all I can know from the outside. That state then is epistemic for an observer. So there is an owner which has the experience, and everybody else is, has an epistemic knowledge, which is only a set of probabilities for all the possible states. It is clear that the fact, for example, that we cannot know the state that we are in this real world, we can only probe and find signals, okay, but no experience in the brain, only electrical, and biochemical signals. That is telling you that consciousness cannot be classical, because a classical information can be copied. You should be able to copy it. So if an experience was just information, classical information, you should be able to copy it.
Right.
But you cannot. I cannot have your experience. You cannot have mine. Each person has its own private reality, private experience.
It's not busy creating narratives. It just knows what feels right and what doesn't feel right. But the adaptive self with its narratives has become so dominant that we don't fall back to our natural instinctive selves. I mean, we are parts of nature, right? Nature is going somewhere. Deliberately or not, it's going somewhere. And it's going somewhere through us, partly. So there is something that wants to come into the world naturally through us, or something that needs to be absorbed from the world by us. And that's all nature, that's all instinctive. It doesn't come as a result of a narrative or an argument line. But we don't listen to nature anymore, even though we are it.
We are nature.
We are lost in abstractions. We are lost in abstractions in our psychology, in our view of the meaning of life, in our science, in our philosophy. We are completely lost in abstractions. And I think that will be the theme of the 21st century.
In other words, the computer is a purely classical system, but we are a quantum classical system. Our cells are not classical. They are quantum classical.
So it's a hybrid.
So it's a hybrid. And therefore our body is actually connected with a quantum system, which is our consciousness, that cannot manifest directly in this world, can interface with our body. So my experience is not in this physical world, like a qubit cannot be in this physical world. Here we only have a bit. Okay?
Yeah.
There we have a qubit. And the qubit, just to
simplify,
for simplicity, has a sense of itself in a way, right? An elementary sense of itself, and so the consciousness and the experience of our world doesn't exist in our world, even if it is an experience of a classical object, because the experience is a conscious experience, means feelings and sensations. That's what experience. Thought is also an experience. A spiritual feeling, or is also an experience. Those can only exist in the quantum world. So we think that what we experience happens here because we interact with classical objects here, but no, the experience is somewhere else. It's exactly like when you are controlling an avatar in a computer. When you have an avatar in a computer that you control,
virtual reality,
which is virtual reality. So it's in virtual reality. You think that you are, playing, that you are really there. If especially if you are a kid, you get so
lost.
Lost in the game, identify with the avatar in the game and that reality, that you forget that soup is ready, probably Mom will call you, whatever. But so in that case, you do not, you think that you are the avatar.
Yeah.
But in fact, your experience is in the body that controls the avatar. But then I'm saying, no, even the experience of you playing a game is in that self, the real system, which is in the quantum world, because you cannot experience anything even in the physical world, which is quantum classical. You have to be a quantum system in a pure state.